Right, so a voluntary education fund is being set up by government as part of moves to rally Ghanaians to willingly support the education sector. According to Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, the Education Ministry is working closely with the Ghana Education Trust Fund, or GET Fund, to fine-tune the modalities for the voluntary fund. Matilda Wamega has more.
The free SHS program commenced in September, covering first-year students in public senior high schools and technical and vocational institutions. Government absorbed all fees for the over 353,000 first-year students. Government said it has injected a total budget of 400 million for the program for 2017. But there is no specific mention in the budget for the exact funding for the program in 2018. Finance Minister says expenditure for the use of goods and services estimated at 3,532.5 million Ghana cedis, representing 1.5% of GDP, will cater for government's priority programs, including the flagship free SHS policy, which enters its second year of implementation. Government is, however, looking at ways to support the education sector with the introduction of a voluntary education fund. According to Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, the fund will enable Ghanaians make voluntary contributions to support education.
With the successful launch of free SHS, government has received proposals from the public, several of which encourage the establishment of a fund to receive voluntary contribution to support education. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, the GET Fund law allows for the setting up of other education-related funds. In 2018, the Ministry will work with GET Fund to set up these education funds to enable Ghanaians make voluntary contributions to support educational institutions and also facilitate stakeholder ownerships in strong senior high school institutions.
Meanwhile, government has announced an increase in capitation grant from 9 cedis per head to 10 cedis in 2018.
In fulfillment of government's promise to make basic education free and ensure participation by all, the capitation grant was increased by 100% from 4 cedis 50 pesos per capita to 9 cedis in 2017. Mr. Speaker, it is worth stressing that this increase by the Akufo-Addo government was the first ever increase in the capitation grant since 2009. Meaning, in all the 8 years that our dear friends, our social democrats, were in office, I'm happy to further announce that there will be a further increase to 10 cedis in 2018 under this government.
Government will also beginning next year absorb the BEC registration fees for all public senior high school students.
BEC subsidy. The government absorbed 70% of the 2017 BEC registration fees and subsidies for all registered candidates in both public and private GFS. In 2018, government will absorb 100% BEC registration for registered candidates from public junior high schools.
Government is also seeking to expand the complementary basic education program to 14 more districts in the country. The program, which is already operational in the 43 districts of the 3 northern regions, Bronx, Ahafo and Ashanti regions, will benefit an estimated 40,000 out-of-school children in 2018.
Staying with the 2018 budget statement, the Finance Minister announced government will create 100,000 direct jobs for young people across the country next year under a new youth employment program.
The invasion of the full army well, Mr. Speaker, was managed through distribution of chemicals to farmers, recruitment of spraying guns, and monitoring and surveillance. This intervention recovered 123,000 hectares of farmlands out of 137,000 hectares affected. A strategic stock of insecticide and other logistics will be built to ensure ready availability of chemicals during outbreaks, as well as intensification of monitoring and surveillance. In 2018, to improve livelihood of livestock farmers in all 10 regions and increase meat production. 2,000 livestock farmers will be supported with 70,000 small ruminants. The ministry will also support 6 national livestock breeding stations to produce and distribute 200 cross-bred heifers, 1,700 improved pigs, and 100,000 cockles. To promote agricultural mechanization, 220 tractors and accessories comprising 141 maize shellers and 77 multi-crop threshers were distributed to farmers and service providers. In 2018, the ministry will distribute 200 tractors and marching implements. To facilitate the provision of community-owned and managed small-scale irrigation facilities, especially in northern Ghana, the ministry identified 192 small dams and dugouts in 64 districts for development under the One Village, One Dam initiative beginning in 2018. In addition, 30 pumping schemes and 100 boreholes will be developed and a feasibility study conducted for water transmission lines in northern Ghana.
Now, Greek Minister Dr. Koto Egusi-Afriyie says the announcement is an indication that government prioritizes the agri sector as a key tool to decreasing unemployment.
The central bank is putting GERSEL together. GERSEL is to give insurance cover to the commercial banks to be able to lend to the farmers. And this is something that has not been done before. The pilot this year is working. So in this budget, we have allocated 400 million to the central bank for them to give cover to the commercial banks, Agricultural Development, NIB, Ghana Commercial Bank, to lend to agriculture.
Well, the minority in Parliament has described as unattainable promises and programs contained in the 2018 budget and economic plan announced by the Finance Minister on Wednesday. Government hopes to create jobs for 100,000 graduates, reduce electricity tariffs, and also roll out key interventions in the social, economic, and health sectors to sustain the growth. But the minority in Parliament believes the budget paints a gloomy picture of the coming year. Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu has been speaking to my colleague Elton Brobe.
First of all, the data that the finance minister used is suspect, if not questionable. If you are still referencing June to measure real sector growth, when you are presenting the budget for the 2018, and you make reference to July, August, September, unreliable data. We want to know the year out 10 performance of the economy. Therefore, we are unable even to accept his debt to GDP projection of 68.5% and the real GDP growth and the contribution of the oil sector. Now, where is the economic competence? You heard the minister say that the economy has turned around. Is this a turnaround economy where unemployment is still high, inflation is still high, government is still borrowing and overcrowding the private sector? You have government himself, the Minister for Finance, on behalf of the President, say that we have a challenge in wage bill and compensation management. And he adds up 100,000 to an existing 650,000 workers. Unimaginable. And everywhere in the world, government that has political will is talking about rationalization within the public sector. But to address graduate unemployment, that is a positive step. But we cannot appreciate how that will sit into an oversized public sector that they've promised to deal with. When he himself came complaining that the wage bill was taking 20% of revenue and as a percentage of GDP. Now, what has happened to $1 million per constituency? What has happened to One Village, One Dam? And
according to them, it's a process that is ongoing, especially the one district, one factory, the One Village, One Dam. It's a process that they hope to complete within the first period.
$1 million per constituency, not even 1 million Ghana cedis. Maybe I was talking about Zimbabwe cedis, because $1 million per constituency, I haven't received mine. I'm not sure whether your constituency have seen it. So it comes as a short list of pledges and unreliable promises as usual. And then the projection. I mean, if you have a minister say that we have provided reliable electricity, what has the new Patriotic Party government done in terms of electricity?
So for
the investment,
some are really questioning the statement more like taking credit for ending the doomsday. And some say that it was an unfortunate statement to come from the MP because really they didn't do much in this particular direction. You share that same thought?
Yeah, I'm sure he should have said we inherited reliable electricity supply which ended doomsday. If they've added to it, I'm not aware of any investment in the sector. It's just like the growth of the economy is largely driven by the oil and gas sector. The investment in oil and gas, monumental and historical, is an NDC legacy and an NDC investment.
Well, Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Kokwa Nyuruho, on his part, has described the 2018 budget presented by the Finance Minister as a dead news budget. Speaking to our sister station Adom News, Mr. Nyuruho said, though there are plans to reduce electricity tariffs, the level of reduction is not what the President promised. He said instead of outlining policies that will put money in the pockets of Ghanaians, the Finance Minister rather spent more time eulogizing his ancestors.
I mean, this budget has no good news. Nothing. You heard Ken Oforiatta try to swim in some biblical verses. Well, I'm sure he's excited himself with those verses, but there's no good news. There's no good news. This is a dead news budget. Last year they told us that, the beginning of this year, the first budget, they christened it as Empa budget, which means good news. If they really had some good news, I'm sure they would have told us, this budget is good news chapter 2. Obviously, there's no good news. And so they say now they've changed their name and they're calling it something else, claiming that they're going to create jobs. 100,000 jobs. There's no roadmap. There's no guideline. The minister just said it in the air. He's gone home. How do they intend to create the 100,000 jobs? In which sectors? You're not paying contractors. And we all know that the construction industry is the largest employer. And you notice that the senior minister, Yasafa Mafo, was not present. If what we are hearing is true, that look, he didn't support some of the things that went into this statement today, then yes, because Yasafa Mafo has made it public that there are no jobs. He's not hiding it at all, that there are no jobs. And that they are not interested in infrastructure expansion. There are no jobs in the public sector. They are even going to look at the payroll and possibly get people off the payroll. The president promised us himself 3-4 days ago that this budget today, they were going to reduce electricity tariffs by 25%. If we cannot take the president for his word. As for the vice president, he has given us enough cause to already doubt his words and his integrity. But we beg the president, he shouldn't join the vice president on that dangerous road.
Now, the ultimate beneficiary of government's plans is the average Ghanaian, and some residents of Kumasi have been sharing their opinions about government's intention to employ 100,000 graduates next year. Let's hear them.
It's a very nice idea that he has brought up, and it can be done since that's his vision. But we are looking for him to put it in place. We want to see it. It's not just about saying it.
The interest of students pursuing university education is going down because they think that during their 4-year period or 6 years or so, there are no jobs. So this is more or less a sign of relief for we the university students, especially those of us who join the fray come next graduation periods.
From where I'm coming from, the slow scammers, the people scam, most of them are graduates. So come on. 100,000 is it will help reduce the rate of scamming.
If the government is really committed to in making sure this is plausible, then I would be very, very glad because I would be enrolled in a job and I would be paid.
Right, so we're taking a break here on Joy News Prime, but we have a bit more coming up on the budget. We're going to be analyzing some aspects of it, so do stay tuned. We're back in a bit. Welcome back to Joy News Prime, and just by way of recap, the Finance Minister Ken Oforiatta today, Wednesday, presented the 2018 budget, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the highlights of the budget. One of the significant things that came up is the income tax threshold. Now, government will be pegging the tax-free threshold to the current minimum wage to protect low-income earners. And then there's also the one-off tax amnesty, and quite a number of them also coming up. The other thing that I'd like to be sharing with you has to do with the reduction in electricity tariffs. But let's look at the alternative dispute resolution ADR using in resolving tax disputes. And then we also look at the taxpayer identification number 10 and the tax clearance certificate. Subcontractors for government contracts shall produce TIN and TCC for contracts, and then extension of National Fiscal Stabilization Levy and Special Import Levy to be extended to 2019. Now, this is one of the controversial issues that came up because the minority or the NDC were saying that they were hoping that government was going to end it. It has been extended. There's also support for private universities, and then the bonded warehousing scheme is going to be reviewed. Now, these are just some of the issues that were presented or came up in the budget. Now, I've been joined on the line now by Professor Godfrey Bokping. He's the head of the finance department at the University of Ghana Business School. Now, welcome to joining us, Prime, and thank you for making time. What in the budget would you say stands out for you?
Thank you very much. Good evening, and good evening to your cherished viewers. I think that overall it's a good budget. I think that the fiscal discipline stands out for me, and the fiscal regime is also quite strong, which is very good.
So with the fiscal discipline, let's just break it down. So you're talking about the fact that government says it's going to spend something and it's going to stay within a certain expenditure limit, and it stays within.
Yes. And then they said they were going to reduce the fiscal deficit, which they have done, and the fact that it keeps on narrowing. That has implication for the borrowing requirements of the government. It also has implication for our debt build-up, and then debt affordability, and then debt sustainability. So from the fiscal side, I think I'll pick on that because Ghana's problem over the years has been fiscal indiscipline, and I think it seems that that is under control. And once we can keep to that, the other variables will also fall in place. But I think that the free senior high school is a good policy. It's an investment a vehicle that I think that is quite good. I think that there is some clarity in terms of the funding also in the 2018 budget, and I think that is also very good. If we can secure its funding and make it more sustainable, I think that is one of the effective ways of narrowing the income inequality and also ensuring that our population, in terms of its quality, human capital, is enhanced, which will be good for productivity going forward. Because in the next 30 years, we are going to have a lot of youth, and if they are not skilled, that will have implication for all of us. And I think that decision or that policy, I think that is quite good, and we have to be able to see to it that it actually works and benefits everybody. And then beyond that, government has also talked about the fact that they also invest in infrastructure to improve quality and all of that. I think it's very good. We may not see the real benefit of that now, but in the next 10, 15 years, 30 years, you're beginning to see that we would have significantly enhanced our human capital base. It should be possible for us to even export labor to other countries. Because if you look at the demographics, even across the world, I mean, Africa is going to have more youth in the working class in the next 30 years compared to the developed countries like US, Europe, Japan, and the rest of them. So what do we do with those numbers? We have to be able to ensure that they are properly skilled, that they are in an employable situation, and therefore the country can realize dividends from that investment for some time to come.
Now, a lot of the time when budgets are read, people who are monitoring the budget tend to say that there's nothing to take away from the budget. This budget provides the relief in electricity tariffs. There's going to be a reduction in electricity tariffs. This is one thing that people can take away. Are there any other things you've identified in the budget that you think that people will come as a relief to people?
Yes, okay, fine. Thank you very much. I mean, your intervention is quite great because over the years we talk about maybe just macroeconomic stability and then the implicit belief of trickle-down effect. That is what we have been talking about over the years. But you can see that beyond the macroeconomic stability or policies that government is putting in place, they are also trying to get to consumers directly through some of these interventions, electricity reduction and all of that. I think when you pick the free senior high school itself, it's also a direct intervention to the poor. Of course, it's not discriminatory whether you are poor or you are rich. Once your child is going through school, then you are not going to pay fees. What that means is that how much you would have spent in terms of school fees and all of that for the academic year 3 terms available to you to either invest or to enhance your consumption or spend it the way you want to spend it. So whether we like it or not, the free senior high school itself is a form of subsidy from the state to parents, guardians whose children are going to school, who started school this academic year and will go next academic year and all of that. Again, in the 2018 budget, you also see that government has extended the registration, how much we have to pay for our children to take from the coverage of 70% to 100%. That is additional subsidy to parents, to guardians whose children are going to sit for the BEC and all of that. So that puts immediate money in people's pocket that they can spend whatever way they want it, either save, invest, or enhance their consumption. Beyond that, I think when you also look at the flagship programs, okay, that also tells you the spending habit of government that would also have a trickle-down effect or spillover to other sectors. So in addition to that, once government overall signals its intention to go for growth, industrialization, it opens the door for the private sector to also feed in or tap in and see where they can also position themselves in the value chain and then complement government efforts.
What for you is missing in the budget? What would you have expected in there that's not in there?
Okay, great. Job creation.
Well, government is talking about creating some 100,000 jobs
under the direct supervision of the president.
Right.
I'm not too comfortable. Government may have its own reason for doing that in terms of its efficiency. I don't think that it's the optimal decision to take. I bet to differ on that level because you see, you want to be able to ease the restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy generally and hand over that opportunity to the private sector as they've been talking about. And then create the enabling environment for businesses to grow. And then in that process, they hand over appointment letters to people who finish school, people who are in a position to work at the going market rate. I think that approach will be much more sustainable than this direct approach because over the years, government has not been that efficient in terms of job placement or creation or all of that. Of course, I do agree that from the budget, they talked about several reliefs to entrepreneurs, startups, grace period, and all of that. I think that there's pressure on government to demonstrate that they have created jobs and therefore they can get the numbers and exhibit that. But I think that in that process, we may not be exploring efficiency and it may not be durable and it may not be sustainable going forward. But it will come across as a good intervention given that job creation has become more or less like the cliche today. If you don't talk about job creation, then it's like you're not doing anything. But overall, I think that we want to be able to, and then what we have come up with clear strategies in terms of job mapping in Ghana. and then some kind of tracking tools in terms of how many jobs are being created on monthly basis, on quarterly basis, and all of that. I think as a country we should be able to tell. We should be able to provide on monthly basis, on quarterly basis. Let's see which sectors are employing. And that would also be important in driving curriculum development, program development in the tertiary institutions. Then we can match what the needs are with those who are offering those needs. I think it will be good for all of us. But because we don't have data, it's very difficult.
All right.
It's difficult for us to tell that this is what is happening. I think that beyond that, if you see in the last 10 years, you will find that the formal sector employed that much. We're beginning to see the informal sector rather absorb labor. So there's a real need for us to formalize the informal sector to a large extent. Here, probably we can be happy to the extent we are talking about the digital address system and all of that. But I think we need to go beyond that. Then we'll be able to track, we'll be able to file properly, and also ensure that those who are entering the informal sector are properly captured in the tax bracket, which can also enhance our revenue envelope.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Godfrey Bokwing. He's the head of the finance department at the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you for making time. We're taking a break here on Joy News Prime, but still to come in business. Finance Minister has declared a reduction in the country's debt to GDP ratio, which now stands at 68.3% by the end of the year. Stay tuned. We'll be back with that.
Hello, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining me on business. Now, doing some more coverage on the budget. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta says government, through prudent management of the economy, has reduced the country's debt to GDP ratio significantly to 68.3% by the end of the year. According to the minister, this is the first time since 2006 Ghana has witnessed a year-on-year reduction in the debt to GDP ratio. Ghana has consistently been recording mounting debt to GDP since 2016. The finance minister was presenting the 2018 budget statement in Parliament.
Our government, through prudent management of the economy, reduction in the fiscal deficit, and a policy of debt reprofiling, has successfully reduced Ghana's debt burden. The debt to GDP ratio has declined from 73% at end December 2016 to 68.3%. That's at the end of September 2017. This is the first time, Mr. Speaker, this is the first time since 2006 that Ghana has witnessed a year-on-year reduction in the debt to GDP ratio. The interest burden of Ghana's debt has also been reduced. Interest payments have reduced from 45% of tax revenue to 43.8% in September 2017, over 41.9% reduction at the end of 2017. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that the annual average rate of debt accumulation of 36% over the last 4 years has declined over the last 9 months from 36 average rate increase to 13.6%. This, Mr. Speaker, again, is the lowest annual public debt over the last decade.
Now, government has set an overall gross domestic product GDP growth rate target of 6.8% for the 2018 fiscal year. The finance minister says government is projecting to achieve a non-oil GDP growth rate of 5.4% with an end period inflation rate of 8.9%. The economy is also expected to have an average inflation rate of 9.8%, a fiscal deficit of 4.5% GDP, and primary balance surplus of 1.6% of GDP.
The following macroeconomic targets are set for the 2018 fiscal year. Overall GDP growth rate of 6.8%, non-oil GDP growth rate of 5.4%, end period inflation rate of 8.9%, fiscal deficit of not 3.8%, fiscal deficit of 4.5%. Primary surplus of 1.6% of GDP, and gross foreign assets to cover at least 3.5 months of imports of goods and services. Fiscal sector 2018. Mr. Speaker, moving into 2018, our fiscal program is firmly anchored on the ongoing fiscal consolidation. Our prime focus is to ensure that the fiscal deficit, which remains our principal fiscal anchor, is programmed to decline to 4.5% of GDP from the projected 2017 end-year estimate of 6.3%.
All right, so that was the Finance Minister. Now, if you missed out on the main presentation, let's now get some highlights of the 2018 budget statement. Correspondent George Rafi, who covered the presentation in Parliament later, spoke with economist Professor Peter Korte, who was optimistic about the targets set out by government in the budget.
The budget has some significant achievements and some areas where I feel there's more room for improvement. The achievement you can see on the macro front, where inflation has been contained, exchange rate has been fairly stable, the budget deficit has been reduced significantly, and we see some attempt to streamline expenditure. But on the revenue side, we see a shortfall in revenue generation, and I think that is an area where government has to focus, because last year when this budget was read, some of us raised the point that all these tax incentives would work depending on the response from the private sector. Once private sector responds, then you would have them producing more, generating more revenue, paying more taxes. But at the moment, the response has not been very significant, and that is one of the reasons why there's been some revenue shortfall. But I believe going forward, government will learn its lessons and try to streamline its activities.
Talking about learning lessons, let's look at even the revenue approach, the measures that they outline in raising revenue as well. Do you think that they have learned their lessons, having seen the economy now for almost 8 months or even 9 months?
Well, I believe so. You see, some of these incentives, tax incentives, they are partial. There are other factors that will work to enable the private sector kick in at the cost of doing business. So electricity tariffs, infrastructure, roads, and many others. So at the moment, we've seen tax reduction. We've seen some attempts to provide infrastructure, some attempts to provide all the enabling environment. So I believe we'll see more of the results in 2018, but 2017 is a bit premature to see significant improvement.
Away from the budget now, and the Association of Ghana Industries AGI has partnered the government of Catalonia to boost trade ties between both economies. This partnership will see investors in the industrial sector come to Ghana to explore business opportunities and also help local industries with best practices for growth and development. This was made known at the AGI Industrial Summit and Exhibition 2017. Charles Aiti reports.
The Ghana Industrial Summit and Exhibition is a platform that aims to link foreign industrialists with their local counterparts to the country. The event saw captains of industry explore ways of investing in the manufacturing industry. Speaking to Joy Business, incoming president of the AGI, Dr. Edu Jemfi, says the event is in line with the 2018 budget, which has prioritized government industrialization agenda as part of its key indicators for economic growth.
This exhibition basically to showcase what Ghanaian industries can do. And basically we are exposing it to the public for them to understand there's a lot of things that Ghanaian companies are capable of doing. When you see the 10-point policy that the government is putting together so far as industrial transformation is concerned, of course that means that we, the private sector, must be positioning ourselves in terms of changing our thinking.
Joy Business got in touch with some exhibitors at the event who expressed satisfaction over AGI's move to reposition itself in order to maximize the industrialization agenda.
We want people to know about the natural products we do. We want to network and get acquainted with other Ghanaian businesses and industries so that we can link up and understand the totality of the value chain, so that if there's people can be suppliers, producers for some of my raw materials. I hope to meet them here.
There is a kind of relation between Ghana and Spain in terms of industrial, but we want to improve this relation. That's the reason why I'm here, because I want to try to promote the Spanish machinery manufacturers in Ghana. Then let's try it if we can do much cooperation.
Well, we're looking at the mileage for one. That's very important to us. We want to see if they'll focus much with respect to their publicity. Yeah.
The three-day event ends on Friday, the 17th of November.
That's all in business tonight. Many thanks for watching. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji Riafi. Have a good evening.
This is Joy News Prime.
Right, so staying with the budget, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has announced the Office of the Special Prosecutor will next year begin a review of alleged corrupt contracts signed by metropolitan, municipal and district assemblies for the necessary prosecution. Delivering the 2017 budget statement in Parliament, he said the establishment of the office will help government step up efforts at dealing with corruption in the country. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo has more.
A day after Parliament passed the bill to allow for the establishment of the office, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta told the House allocations have been made for it in the 2018 budget statement.
Mr. Speaker, in the fight against corruption, the Office of Special Prosecutor's Bill was just yesterday passed by this august House. This is a significant move in the overwhelming national desire to combat corruption. In 2018, the Office of the Attorney General's Department will operationalize the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Review all agreements for MDAs and MMDAs with the aim to secure successful convictions in the vast majority of cases referred to the office by the police.
Indications are that it will take a while before the office begins work fully. The Attorney General is expected to nominate the Special Prosecutor. Parliament will then give approval before the President will go ahead and formally appoint him or her. Chairman of Parliament Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, Ben Abdallah Banda, says the office is a game changer in the fight against corruption.
As soon as his signature is appended, then it is authenticated and it becomes a law and it becomes operational. We will then be waiting for the nomination, the appointment of the special prosecutor and the prior approval of the Parliament of Ghana. And he or she starts his work. The office is being established to serve the people of Ghana. The office is not being established to serve only MPP. It is being established to ensure that corruption and corruption-related matters are minimized, or if not nipped in the bud completely.
The Director General of the Internal Audit Agency, Ransford J, has tasked audit committee members of municipal and district assemblies in the Brahafo region to make available their financial management expertise at the local level in order to check financial irregularities. Speaking at today's orientation for newly constituted audit committees in the region, he further advised the members to remain objective, especially in ensuring implementation of the recommendations of the Public Accounts Committee to individual assemblies. Nestor Kafuyajuma filed this report from Sunyani.
The orientation was aimed at educating members of the audit committees from various assemblies in the Bono Ahafo region on the financial management and administrative procedures of the local governance system. Director General of Internal Audit Agency, Ransford J, urged the audit committee members to familiarize themselves with the necessary bylaws and documentations on their respective assemblies in performing their duties.
The meetings of this committee is just going to be a decision-making meetings, mostly on the recommendations of the auditors. So we need to have that quality from them. To be very honest, integrity should be above board. They should be very objective. They should also be competent.
The Dean of Studies and Research at the Institute of Local Government Studies, Dr. Eric Odro Osai, urged the committee members to be vigilant on the prudent utilization of financial resources by the assemblies.
This committee is made up of professional chartered accountants, members of the Institute of Internal Auditors, and members of the Internal Audit Agency. Their role is to ensure that they support the assemblies for good financial management so that we'll be able to reduce irregularities that are normally cited in the Auditor General's report. The purpose of this training is to expose these chartered accountants into the operations of local government and for them to understand local government administration and financial management system. This is important because most of them are coming from the private sector. They need to understand the operations of the local government so that they'll be able to make their professional expertise available to the local government so that they will be able to benefit. In all of this, we want them to inject financial discipline in the management of the resources of the local governments.
Nestor Kafuyajum's report for Joy News.
We're taking a break to bring you entertainment and to find out what the budget had to say about that sector. Stay tuned.